Easy to spend when it's not yours. Good luck paying it off, my husband said, laughing, his tone dripping with arrogance. I stared at him, my hands trembling. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice thick with barely contained fury. Lane shrugged, his nonchalance like a slap to the face. Oh, I just used that card to cover my $50,000 trip to Dubai. No big deal, he said with a grin. My jaw dropped. You stole my card and spent 50 grand? On yourself? Do you have any idea what you've done? My husband smirked. Relax. I gave it back, didn't I? Stop being so dramatic. I took a deep breath, my anger boiling over. Lane, you don't seem to realize something very important, I said, locking eyes with him. He didn't know it yet, but he had just signed himself up for the biggest nightmare of his life. My name is Colette, and I'm a housewife in my 50s. I live with my husband, Lane. My father is a director of a large company, and Lane began working there, hoping to follow in his footsteps. However, my father hasn't decided whether my husband will become his successor, and honestly, I can't blame him. The issue lies in Lane's attitude. Lane, look at this, I said, holding up a pair of his pants. This is what happens when you leave tissues in your pockets before throwing them in the washing machine. I had already removed the white specks of paper from the pants, but my frustration was evident. What are you going to do about it? My favorite clothes were in that load. I've told you so many times to check your pockets, I complained, unable to hide my frustration. This wasn't the first time Lane had made this mistake. Despite my repeated reminders, he just didn't seem to remember. Each time it happened, I would scold him, and at first, he would apologize with a simple, "I'm sorry." But over time, his apologies became less sincere, and he started snapping at me instead. He grew irritable and would stop listening altogether. Are we really doing this again? Lane said sharply. I'm tired too. Can't you cut me some slack? Isn't it a wife's job to handle this kind of thing? I was taken aback by his nerve. How is this someone else's fault? I shot back, my voice rising. If you checked your clothes like I've told you countless times, none of this would have happened. You're the one who doesn't listen. Lane didn't argue. He just stared at his phone, tuning me out like he always did when I brought up something he didn't want to hear. This had been his pattern since the early days of our marriage. Frustrated, I let out a heavy sigh. Stop sighing so much, Lane said, his tone cutting. Are you trying to pollute the whole house? I stared at him, stunned by his ridiculous comment, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to let him get away with it this time. This isn't the only issue, I said, pulling up a message from my father on my phone. My father mentioned your performance at the company. He's concerned. Lane frowned, confused. What do you mean? He asked cautiously. I pointed to the screen. You're being mentored by one of the company's best employees, but your attitude is causing problems. It's become a topic of discussion among the higher-ups. You don't take your work seriously. You're constantly on your phone, ignoring warnings, and slacking off when no one's watching. Instead of doing your work, you delegate it to those below you. Even the training staff is struggling with you, I concluded. Lane's face darkened, but I pressed on. My father is so stressed about this that he's considering giving the position to my younger brother instead of you. My husband sat up straight, alarmed. What? That's impossible. I married you because your father said I'd be his successor. You need to talk to him right now. I couldn't hide my disappointment. His words only confirmed my suspicions. I had never felt that you were kind to me since we got married, I said. The last time you showed me kindness was before we were married, and even then, it was only because you were trying to win me over. After that, you stopped caring. I see now, you never loved me. You only wanted the position of heir to the board of directors, I added, my voice filled with bitterness. Lane tried to interject, but I held up my hand. Let's get a divorce, I said firmly. He blinked in shock. Why? You love me, don't you? Won't it be hard on you if we get a divorce? I shook my head, my voice icy. Love you? Don't be silly. My love for you has already cooled off. So let's get a divorce and leave each other alone. You have to let go of becoming a successor. Is that clear? I continued angrily. Lane sneered. Yeah, fine. I don't want to keep being tied down by an uninteresting woman like you. The divorce was finalized faster than I had anticipated. Neither of us kept the house, so we prepared to move out. Most of the furniture was mine, and I took it with me, much to Lane's irritation. There were some disputes, but everything was eventually resolved. Our long marriage ended almost effortlessly. Too effortlessly, perhaps. Strangely, neither of us felt sadness or anxiety. On the contrary, I felt a sense of relief. I was finally free of a man I no longer wanted in my life. But just a few days after the divorce, I noticed something strange. One of the debit cards from my wallet was missing. Throughout our marriage, Lane had a bad habit of rifling through my wallet and taking whatever he wanted. If it had been a regular card, I might not have cared as much. But this wasn't just any card. Losing it could cause serious trouble. I immediately reached out to Lane, only to learn he was on a trip to Dubai. I would have to wait a few days to confront him in person, which left me anxious and uneasy. I couldn't let this go. I had to get the card back. When the day to meet Lane finally arrived, we agreed to meet at a coffee shop. He showed up a little late, but as soon as he sat down, I demanded, "Lane, give me back my debit card." With a smirk, Lane casually handed me the card. "Easy to spend when it's not yours. Good luck paying it off," he said, laughing. I stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Lane shrugged nonchalantly. "I used that card to pay for my entire $50,000 trip to Dubai," I gasped. "How could you steal someone's card and spend such an obscene amount of money on yourself? This is absolutely unacceptable," I snapped. "You're going to face serious consequences for this, Lane." He raised an eyebrow, his tone dismissive. "What are you even saying? I just gave you your card back, didn't I? Have you finally lost your mind?" I scoffed. "Lane, you don't seem to realize something very important. Something that's going to turn your life upside down." He frowned, his tone now tinged with unease. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward and said, "Sure, you took the card from my wallet. But here's the twist. It wasn't mine." Lane's eyes widened. "What do you mean it wasn't yours?" "Exactly what I said," I replied. "That card belongs to my father." He looked completely bewildered. "Why would you have your father's debit card in your wallet?" I explained. "My father left his notebook, which had some of his cards, at our house a while back. Since he was busy with work and didn't use them often, I decided to hold on to them until he could retrieve them. But leaving the debit card where you could find it was a mistake. You took it, thinking it was mine, and spent $50,000 of my father's money." Lane's face turned pale. "You're saying it wasn't your card?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Exactly," I said calmly. "As soon as I noticed the card was missing, I called my father and explained everything. He told me, 'Don't worry, I'll handle it.' He already has a plan, so I left it to him." Lane's expression grew more panicked. "You told your father?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes," I replied firmly, "and he's on his way now. You'd better be ready." My ex-husband's panic escalated. He began hurriedly gathering his things. I need to go," he stammered, his voice shaky. I watched him with a cold gaze. "You're always trying to run away when it's time to face the consequences of your actions. That's one of the things I despise most about you, Lane. You need to own up to what you've done and take responsibility." Lane's face turned red with anger and he lashed out. "Enough! How far are you going to go to humiliate me? You're nothing but a pathetic slut. I never should have married you. Stop acting so high and mighty while wasting my time," he snapped. I sighed deeply. "Lane, this situation is entirely your fault, and yet you have the audacity to act as though I'm to blame? Why did I ever marry someone like you? I regret every single moment I wasted with you. I could have had a better life, someone kinder, someone who truly cared. Instead, I devoted my life to someone utterly worthless. I must have been a fool." My ex-husband glared at me, his tone dripping with venom. "You're so careless," he snapped. "This is all on you. If you had taken better care of your things, none of this would have happened. You're the one who created this mess, not me." I shook my head, disbelief etched on my face. "Lane, even if the card had been mine, you had no right to use it without asking. You've been taking money from me for years, but stealing this card like some kind of farewell gift is a new low." "I bear no responsibility for what happened," my ex-husband shouted, his voice rising. Why don't you stop blaming me for your own mistakes? I held his gaze, refusing to back down. Actions have consequences. It's time you stopped running from them and learned to take responsibility for what you've done, I replied. His excuse was so absurd, it made me question if he'd lost his mind. No matter how you looked at it, my ex-husband was entirely to blame for stealing the debit card. He had developed a habit of taking things without permission, and this situation was no different. The fault was his alone. I had done nothing wrong, yet he was trying to shift the blame onto me. He says it's because of my so-called sloppy management, I thought, annoyed. But that's not true at all. I handled everything perfectly fine. The real problem wasn't me. It was Lane and his complete disregard for boundaries. Why don't you just admit what you've done? I demanded. But he refused to own up to it. No matter how much I pushed, he stubbornly denied any wrongdoing. I let out a heavy sigh, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in his expression. Lane flinched, but he still didn't acknowledge his actions. It was time to make him understand the seriousness of the situation. At that moment, the last key player arrived. Colette, sorry to keep you waiting, and Lane, it's been a while, my father said, striding toward us. My ex-husband's face went pale as he realized my father had actually shown up. He clearly hadn't expected this. His nervous eyes darted to my father's face, then back to mine, silently pleading, Colette, what's going on? Hello, sir, Lane stammered, his voice unsteady. Trying to regain some control, he hurried to call over a waiter and order a drink for my father. His demeanor had shifted completely. He was no longer the defiant, dismissive man I'd been arguing with moments ago. His shoulders trembled slightly, and he forced a smile that only betrayed his anxiety. I've missed you so much since Colette and I divorced, my ex-husband said quickly, his tone overly friendly. How have you been? He spoke as though he genuinely cared, adopting a kind and mature facade. From the outside, he might have seemed like a considerate ex-husband maintaining a bond with his former father-in-law, but it was all a calculated act, an attempt to steer the conversation away from his wrongdoing and keep control of the situation. My father wasn't fooled. As a member of a company's board of directors, he had encountered countless people like Lane, smooth talkers trying to manipulate their way out of trouble. My father's expression darkened, his distaste for my ex-husband's behavior clear. He cut through the pleasantries without hesitation. Lane, my father began, his voice calm but laced with authority and anger. Do you understand what you've done? Do you realize how wrong it is to use someone else's card without permission? Even I felt a chill from the weight of his words, despite not being the one they were directed at. My father's tone carried a quiet but undeniable power, and I could see Lane struggling to hold himself together under the pressure. His facade cracked, and with a meek nod, he finally muttered, Yes. My ex-husband had always treated me poorly, but he never dared to show that side of himself in front of my father. My father was a man known for his kindness, respectfulness, and consideration for others. However, he was uncompromisingly strict with those who challenged or exploited his generosity. Even I, his own daughter, found his anger deeply intimidating when it surfaced. In this moment, Lane stood trembling before my father, whose fury was palpable. What you did is nothing short of theft, my father said, his tone icy and authoritative. If you were still my daughter's husband, perhaps I could find it in me to forgive you. But now you're just a stranger. Do you understand what that means? Lane's face stiffened at my father's words. He clearly grasped their implication. Legal action was inevitable. I had already learned that my father had consulted a lawyer, and Lane would likely be forced to repay the $50,000 he had stolen. On top of that, my father had ensured that my ex-husband was removed from the company and was now jobless. With no steady income, paying back such a large sum seemed impossible. If my father refused to show mercy, Lane was headed for disaster. His unsuccessful job search only added to his desperation. Lane collapsed onto the floor, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. I'm so sorry, he begged, his voice breaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought the card belonged to Colette. My father's expression hardened further. You thought the card belonged to Colette? Do you really think such an excuse is acceptable? My ex-husband turned ghostly pale and stammered. What I did was awful. I deeply regret it. Please forgive me. I'll do anything to make this right." Tears began streaming down his face as he pleaded desperately. My father looked at me, his stern demeanor softening slightly as he asked, "What should I do?" I met his gaze with a calm smile and replied, "I can't forgive him for his actions or his attitude. Let's make sure he faces the consequences." At my words, Lane's pleas grew more frantic. "Please, I'm begging you," he cried. But it was too late. What he had done was unforgivable. His behavior during our marriage was something I could never let go of, and now I saw this as my chance for a small measure of justice. "Good luck with your life," I said coldly before my father and I left the coffee shop. My ex-husband sat there in despair as we walked away. True to his word, my father hired a lawyer and pursued repayment of the $50,000 Lane had stolen. Unable to face the consequences in court, he took out multiple loans to repay the full amount in one lump sum, as my father had demanded. From that moment, my ex-husband vanished. According to mutual acquaintances, he disappeared without a trace. I had my suspicions about what happened to him, but since it wasn't something I could openly investigate, I chose to act as if I didn't know. Now, I live with my father. I've caused him many inconveniences over the years, and when I apologized for that, he forgave me with a smile, calling me his sweet daughter. My father is already in his 80s and doesn't have much time left. That's why I've made it my mission to ensure he can live the rest of his life peacefully and without regrets.